Good morning.
Good morning.
And so we continue. First, some practical advice. Taking care of the carpets and washing them, steam cleaning them, as well as taking care of the vents, would remove some of the breathing difficulties that you've been complaining about and having.
How deep into the vents?
What you could see presently above you.
Perfect. On it this week.
We believe it's on our son's agenda before your sister arrives.
Yeah, so that gives us 2 weeks, but I'll be on one of them this week.
Good. Okay, let us begin. So, where we left off, doing a quick recap for those watching. We first last week talked about, 2 weeks ago, talked about the aspect of the idea of creation and using the Star of David, as above, so below. We clearly outlined the part of the triangle that points upward, and the spiritual attainment that happens from each point, and where it eventually comes back to accumulate an understanding of self from each of the different aspects, from the personal self of I am, including the comma, and getting past and realizing that there's a comma there to add parts to the creation. Not enough of being, but a place of doing to attain being, which always works out backwards, not the way creation works. Despite the popularity of such beliefs, sliding over to the other side and realizing you are not alone, that there is a multitude of life around you, and realizing the equalness of it, of what God created. And then moving upward to the final point of the triangle, which is what you call God, as you understand it. And realizing in harmony that there is no greater than or less than, there's only part of, which is what makes the energy of eternity move. The realization that God does not look at one part of itself and say, this is greater than that. There was nothing designed within this universe and blessed with life with this idea in mind. It does not understand such concepts because it is. And if it is, how can you be greater than or less than? You simply are, which moves the understanding into a state of being. The harmonizing and equalizing of all ends of the triangle then comes back down to where it began, the concept of self. All sides harmonizing, all sides equal, all energy flowing. God plus God equals God. And it all comes home in awareness of your true self. We then moved into describing the downward triangle, the mirror image, the duality, as above, so below. As we have expressed before, God is not the great giver. God is the great exchanger. If there is something you wish to understand of God, you must give something up. It's implied. Because everything is dealing with a point of perception. Any idea, any thought, any emotion is a focus of a perception. And so in order to perceive something else than what you are perceiving now, that perception must evolve and change. Therefore, whatever it was must be released for whatever it is now. And this grand truth works in whether you are creating in the way that you understand it to be now, or creating in the way that God created. It is still an exchange, an ever deepening exchange, one that does not end, we might add. Because it is impossible for the little self of God to understand the complexity and all of God. And so it is an ever-enriching journey of understanding self and it simultaneously. The energy that makes things go and the consciousness that drifts through it. The state of I am. We begun with the part of the self, the bottom of the triangle, and dealt with that this is about the group mind of the spiritual attachments, what you understand it to be, 3 pillars in your mind. And while you tap in and have your own personal ideas of these pillars, you also connect with your brothers and sisters here as to what, as a group, you believe it to be. And these become into what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. A simple truth would be, if you threw a party and guests came over, it would not be okay to start breaking bread or serving fish that is not limited. It would not be okay to pour all night from the same decanter of wine and never run out. Because this is not normal. What is normal? It doesn't matter if there's a question of what is not normal. You would not even think of doing this because you know you are not supposed to. Not supposed to, why? Because you believe you're not supposed to? Or because you're tapped into the group mind of what's not supposed to be? Which is influencing which? We talked about, from this perspective, reaching back into the previous lessons and discussing group mind creations, and talked about the workplace and how one workplace does not function the same way as another, does not have the same core values or beliefs. The energy flows differently. And when you take a new job, it can be very abrasive to first be there because you are not tapped in yet and accepted into that group mind workplace. But once you are, not only does the rules and regulations make sense, including the insanities that is involved there, you were supposed to correct us.
What do you mean?
We use the word insanity. And we had asked you to correct us if we use it to substitute another.
I remember you asking, and I honestly don't remember.
Uh-oh.
I know.
So we discussed about how when you move from one job to another job, that changes, and that it's actually because of working and changing from one group mind creation to another. And that it's all based on agreement. And that your society, your social structures, are based on group mind agreements. And this could be focused locally within a building. It could be focused countrywide, globally. It depends upon the belief and what we are talking about. But when you are tapped into that group mind, it has an influence on your thoughts and emotions and your perceptions of what is possible. And at the point of overcoming the first one, and we talked about it in this way with religion, the state of mind of set beliefs that you follow, and that the focus is not on what you are. The focus is on living your life a particular way so that you get the afterlife reward that is supposed to come from it. And that the rules, which would be the same as the workplace or whatever group mind you are talking about, is there to give you a defined sense of self, to limit your scope of perception into a manageable level of what is okay, what is not okay, and what is my room of bounds between those two walls, to create my experience, for better or for worse. When a mind gets to the point that those rules and regulations no longer satisfy it as a definition of purpose, it realizes that it's more than what it thinks it is, the limited ego self, which loves rules and regulations for safety. As long as there's rules and regulations and the illusion that everyone else is following those rules, it creates a safe environment to exist. And that sense of safety, even if you have to lie to yourself about it, is of utmost importance.
That's the insanity?
Correct.
Okay.
And it's really nothing more than a misperception, but we'll get to that. So we moved on up to the point of including what you would call us being spirit, angels, aliens, however you see other life. Whatever the religious structure, the Buddhas, the Dakinis, whatever the religious structure is, to climb. Where the rules and regulations are no longer going to satisfy you, and so you've moved away from those patriarchal rules and regulations and moved into a more esoteric form of understanding and seeing the universe. And we made the point that this side of the triangle is a bit more insidious. And the reason why is because when you get into that group mind creation, it is not just on this plane. There is the assumption with your creations that it's only on this planet, and that is not true. You are creating into the mental body, the emotional body, the astral body, the spiritual plane, laying out expectations. And while in that side of the triangle, and we use the term metaphysical communities, the descriptors and the understanding becomes that much more creative, almost to the point of being called fantastical. The essence of it is that whatever it is you are contacting in whatever form you think it is greater than you.
Is it the same as the first point of the triangle, except dressed up a little more esoterically?
That side of the triangle is the part of the group mind that extends beyond the physical plane. And for example, fantastical, but just as an example, we invite you to lunch on the astral plane. Come meet us, Spirit is waiting. Without working out that side of the triangle, the second spiritual attachment, you would believe that upon meeting us in the spiritual plane, that some type of worship would be required. And we use that word carefully because people say, oh, I would never worship. The moment that you give something greater power than what you are capable of, you are worshiping it. You have created a false idol. It's easy to see a false idol when it looks like a golden cow. But false idols take many forms and fashions. And so we use the term kowtowing. There would be some type of supplication. And let's get the obvious out of the way, not the physical bowing. But there certainly is mental and emotional bowing. It happens all the time. You can see it in channel meetings. There is the invitation to converse with Spirit, but they won't talk to Spirit. And if they do, there's usually a backup running space of, I just want to say how powerful and amazing it is to sit in your presence. What's wrong with your seat?
What I love about these conversations is that I get it's more and more apparent that I'm just talking to you.
Correct.
And it's, in a way, you see and perceive things differently. So to me, wow, this is crazy. This is new. Crazy in a good sense. This is new. In a way, I'm in awe, but not as in you know everything. You've even said multiple times, we're here to learn with you as well. Like, there's still things you are learning. But it's always nice. It's like visiting another culture and being open and learning from them, but I wouldn't supplicate myself to them.
Then you have learned.
Wow, that is so gracious. That means a lot, your blessings to me.
As it should. So this part of the triangle is getting past that and realizing they're not any better than you. And the only thing we have claimed is that we perceive ourselves clearer. And notice the difference of verbiage. Not clear. Clear has a period after it.
Mm-hmm.
Clearer obviously points to a path that continues. And as we have mentioned before, there are beings that we have encountered that is so advanced in the sense of what we perceive to be reality and ourselves within it, that we do not even begin to comprehend its experience, but we wish to learn. We wish to learn.
When it comes to, like, just as an example, when we were talking about the digital ecosystem, would that be an example of something going on the physical this physical manifestation of us in vehicles that you are learning about, like an older person learning new technology from a younger person? Would that be an example of you learning from us? Do you see what I'm asking? What is a concrete example of you having learned from us?
Let us give an example. We have expressed many times that our son has colorful ways of expressing himself, and that we take great joy with it. The time that he was having the conversation and the idea of the higher self being the one to set the lessons, and his response to it was us learning. And we will briefly repeat the story for those at home. Our son was with his guru, and he was trying to understand his painful path as a child. One could call it almost torturous in how he grew up. And so here comes his physical teacher to talk about the joys of the love of spirit, the joys of love of connecting to the higher self, the joys of connecting to God. And he came from a place as a child that truly 100% believed, because of all the physical things that occurred to him, that God did not like him, there was something wrong with him, and simply his presence alone would make people unhappy. And keep in mind, this understanding was before he came to the grand realization. Of course he would see it that way. How else would a child see it? A child cannot make the parent wrong, or the parental figure for the time wrong. Because for the child of a mind, the moment that the parental figure becomes wrong, there is no safety. And as we have pointed out, quite often your mind chooses the options of lying up to and including blaming and hurting yourself just to keep the sense of safety. Because to the ego, you could take the pain, but you can't take not being safe. What would you do? And so the mind protects itself by heaping the issues upon you. Because you are still functioning, you are still present, and you can still move on. Now, when it came time for his teacher to joyfully come forward and, as we should say, spiritually lead with the chin, he punched, and he punched hard. He wouldn't hear any of it. And we believe his two choice expressions that he used to explain his point of view. One was, so let me see if I get this straight. Anyone in our world that would treat a child in such a manner would immediately be arrested and brought up on charges for torturing a child. And we say in this world, it's not okay. But now you're telling me the higher self arranged all these things to happen for a lesson? How is that not child abuse? I was not an adult. I was a child. How is that not child abuse? And why would I follow something so insane?
A set of secure beliefs. It makes sense to the ego. It's not insane.
Correct. So, and the second one was what we said for the last meeting that he said. No need to repeat. But our point is, when he said that, it was more than just the words. He emanated an energy flare, if you will, of truth expressed in a pinpointed way that got the attention of a great many beings. Why? Because it was expressed so plainly. It cut through all of that root mind perceptions of that issue. An absolute perceived rejection. I will not believe that. That is not true. As we watched it demonstrated, our brother in body, with limited perceptions of himself. Does that matter? For that one glorious moment, he shined his truth, and he demonstrated it with such clarity. It clarified us. And that doesn't make our perception of it wrong. The gift he gave us was a different angle of it. A new nuance, a new vibration to add to the collective of self, and how that truth set off our intuitive work and vibrated in such a way because of the power of it that it rearranged our perceptions.
So that's also probably, is it safe to say that's also another impetus? Because a lot of people are thinking, oh, we have to break the reincarnation cycle, blah, 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 with this intention of living here sucks terribly. But coming back and being reincarnated is one of the pulls these moments, and this is why you've said before, spirits wait with bated breath.
Correct.
For these moments.
Because we learn from you as you learn from us. It is not a one-way street. And that is bringing it back to point of the triangle. When you free yourself, you get to interact with that part and learn so much more. Learning becomes possible because you are not seeking the sense of perfection from an outside source that is divine that you must supplicate yourself to, prove yourself to. And understand why we said this aspect can be more insidious than where it started from. Because where it started from was 10 rules in a book. You can read it, you can pick it up and hold it. You can see it, you can quote it. What can you quote here? It's a matter of perspective, and perspective is perception. It's not physical, although it affects the physical. And so you're dealing with it from a grander point of view. But if you don't understand how it works, well, you can cloud yourself that much further, because now we're not talking about the rules of God. We're talking about the experience of the thatness. That is still based on 10 rules. Mentally and emotionally. Which then still creates the physicalness of life around you. And not only are you dealing with what you think, you're tapped into it if you're a Buddhist, what the Buddhists think. If you're a Christian, what the Christians think. And that part of the group mind is going through absolute turmoil at the moment. Going through massive changes of what is real and what is not. It is at war with itself. It is in the middle of a transformation. But then we come to the Hindus. Then we come to the New Agers. But now let's break down the New Agers to different sections. The Reiki folk, the Wiccan folk, the pagans, the Satanists. All different perspectives. And yet, the limitations you find in one, you find in another. Although, if you were to have a conversation across a table while having tea, they would deny this violently. It is not the same, which is why we are better than them. Really, produce a miracle. Show me some magic. Make it happen. But it's the talk of these things, not the activities of these things to experience. Always the striving, always the reaching, always the to-do list of what you must do. And within that to-do list, mentally and emotionally, the forehead is to the floor. There is belief of limitation and separation. Today's subject, we go to the final part of the triangle and we discuss God. Because there is nowhere else for that path to go. It is the third spiritual attachment. And as we did in the previous meeting, we're going to say the warning so our son doesn't have to write it. We did get much humor from that.
Oh, that was great.
Which is, what we are about to discuss is going to be considered controversial. It's going to push your buttons. In fact, we will be so clear as to say, that's partly our intent, is to push the boundaries of what you think is real, not by discussing something that's not real, but pulling the curtain back a few feet to give you a glimpse of what lays beyond. And say, does that make you uncomfortable? Good. Because now you need to make peace with it. And that can be by dismissing it altogether and walking away. or allowing yourself to be uncomfortable and find out why. What are the opposing views to what we will say? And why do you oppose them? You might actually, through this process, learn something about yourself, or choose not to, and keep the set of beliefs you have. Your choice. Because this is about your mind and no others. Now, we also wish to say that what we are sharing is a perspective, an idea, and through this idea, it is being delivered as a tool to consider, to give structure, to give form. It is no more than saying, this is this and that is that. Because between the two posts, once again, it's the way your mind works, 3D perspective. You are the third point. You will always be the fulcrum on a seesaw that tilts up and down. And while you're always concerned on which part's up and which part's down, you always ignore the point that it rests upon, what is perceiving all of these events. And that is the focus. Who is perceiving all of this? And how does it gain its experience? And so we begin. So moving from this side of the triangle now into the triangle that we're going to say is the idea of God. There are many forms to God. The Buddhists call it one way, the Muslims another, Hindus another, Sufis a different way. And we can go on and on listing all the different religions and do as you do. Describe the differences, the philosophies, and then make our lists of why one is unclear and another is clear. And maybe through a full day discussion, get 1 or 2 points of seeing why they are similar. It's the beautiful thing about philosophy. It requires no actions. You just discuss and change nothing. Because even the basis of it is I don't know. And if you don't know, there's nothing to do. It is a safe space. Aesthetically clean, nothing will grow there, but safe. And so with the discussion of God, we're not going to go into the particulars of your different versions of God to point out which one's better and which one's not. Not the point of the conversation. But we are going to talk about the history of God. Because foreshadowing it for you, we've brought in group mind at the first point and the second point. Logic would dictate we're going to bring in group mind into the third. But first, we want to shake the foundation of what you call God in your understanding. And we're not going to do this by getting into God's business. We're going to tell it from the history perspective of the minds that were believing in it at that moment. And so we begin our tale discussing the war of the gods. Because there was a war. Your religious histories show this to be true. And these religious histories is also backed by the physical histories. There was a time on this planet that there were many gods. In fact, what a striking coincidence that each culture had their own type of God that they prayed to. And isn't it interesting that at the point those cultures grew strong enough that trade started occurring, intermingling of cultures, one visiting another to bring product, to trade, to commerce, that suddenly the gods started warring. Is it a coincidence that at the same moment, the mindset of those who prayed to those gods was also doing the same thing with their cities? Which one is more advanced? Which one is more cultured? Which one is more artistic? Which one has more wealth? Which one will be in control? Which one were greater warriors? And how strange is it that the gods that they worshipped always matched what they valued? If we had a fierce set of warriors here on the left, it was a warring god that they prayed to. In your history, is there a group of fierce warriors that pray to something like the Buddha in bliss that never responded? Because the fatness is the answer? Somehow, the god was always fierce, like the people that prayed to it. And it was assumed it was because the people were created like their god. So of course they would be. It's what their god valued, is it? We poke at what you would consider that truth. And understand when we say that truth, that was their truth back then. But because that culture no longer exists, that God no longer exists, you get to look at it from a philosophical point of view and not as tapped into a group mind that is powerful and real to you now. And so it becomes easy to look at. But we would point out, if we did the same thing instead and called it Buddha, Krishna, or Christ, or Allah, you'd beat up in arms. So how palatable and real was it to these people? Very. They went to war over this. They killed for this. They conquered for this. Make no mistake, it was as real to them as it is to you. And the truth of the matter is, who they were is who you are now, and you're still playing out the same drama. It has not changed. Has not. And so we bring up the point, which is more likely? That the warring God created the warring people, or the warring people created the warring God? But this you have already answered. And why? Because within this war of the gods, only the one true God was real and the others were false. They were defeated. At first, they were defeated. And then they never truly existed. It was superstitious beliefs. But our one true God is real. Does this make sense so far?
Um, I think it was important that you said as the gods were defeated, they went from real to mythology.
Correct.
This is very clear. I have questions, but I'm going to wait until you're done with this.
Good, thank you. As they would say, we are on a roll.
Yeah, exactly. Keep at it. I'm going to write the questions on the side here.
So now we're going to go into a more modern story that everyone knows on some level and that is familiar with. And there is a grievous oversight in our point of view, in our perspective, in our perception of how you view it, for a grand truth that doesn't have to be looked at. There is a great many that look at the tales of Moses and the Ten Commandments and the slaves leaving Egypt as real and valid. You have made movies, you've made statues, you still talk about it. And so we bring up the fact that it is real to you. The point within that story that we want to bring to your attention is when Moses turned from Egyptian into Moses and went full active and challenged the Pharaoh. And there he was in the throne room. And he was challenging the power of the Egyptian gods. And in response, one of their priests threw down their staff, and it turned into a snake. It was the gods manifesting a form from one to another, an obvious display of power, to clearly show our Egyptian gods are powerful and real. And what do you have with your one God? And Moses threw down his staff, and it turned into an even bigger snake that swallowed the first. And everyone in the throne room watched in horror as the snake swallowed the other one and turned back into a staff. And Moses bent and retrieved it and picked it up. An interesting perspective between wizards and their staffs and Moses and his, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
But we digress.
Who has the bigger staff?
There is that too. And isn't it interesting? The snake, not Native American. Native American considers snake powerful change medicine.
Mm-hmm.
The snake has the ability to shed its skin, to remove and discard old beliefs at once. But for the religion it came from, the snake was represented as evil. And Moses threw down his staff and it became a snake. Why not an eagle? Just a point of interest.
Yeah.
But again, we digress. The story goes along that this occurred as a demonstration that the one God was more powerful than the Egyptian gods. It was a display of power, followed by all of the blights, the diseases, the locusts, the Nile turning red, all caused by the one God. To show its power at Egypt to release and let my people go. And that was the moral of the story. That the one God was more powerful. Are you with us so far?
Yes.
Good. Now, we get to what about the Egyptian priests throwing down the staff and creating a snake in the first place? Well, that was easily explained because they were not called priests, they were called magicians, which has a certain connotation that it was not a natural power.
One point of correction, at least from what I've learned, is they're differentiated. Some consider Moses a magician and them as sorcerers. I know the difference in Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know about real life.
And correct. But as a matter of perspective for those of the religious order, it was explained away in this way.
Mm.
But here is the grand truth that sits in front of everyone's eyes, that is not dealt with and not acknowledged on a conscious level. The fact that the Egyptian priests threw down the staff and it turned into a snake clearly indicates the Egyptian gods were real. They were as real as the one God. It was not a question of validity of gods. It was a question of validity of power.
That's powerful. That's a very powerful subtlety right there.
Isn't it though?
Yeah.
It unlocks many possibilities. Ones that people choose not to see. The story has been in front of them for how long? And no one wants to talk about this? No one has a point of interest? Now, we take it out of the war with gods as promised and now bring it into the people's mindsets at that moment. And the first one we'll start with is the people of Moses. Did they want to leave Egypt?
Mm-hmm.
Did they have anything left to lose?
No.
Were they backed into a corner?
Pretty much.
So, you have a bunch of people praying to the one God in supplication. How would you say those prayers went? Were they completely and wholly devoted, mind, body, and soul, pouring all of their energy into that prayer?
My initial response is, yeah, out of fear and desperation.
Because they had nothing to lose. And so they gave that devotion everything.
Oh, it's that group mind fueling.
Now let's look at the Egyptian side. How long had the religion been around?
A long time. I don't know time period, but a long time, a long ass time.
And the city had what it needed.
Mm-hmm.
The city was already considered developed. The city was already considered culture. The city was already considered to be the jewel of the Nile, the place to be, the example. And as your life shows you now, How devoted are people's prayers that already have everything that they want?
Not very.
Now let's bring in one more fact. They're being challenged. To which God would they pray? Because isn't that diverting the group mind's focus?
What do you mean?
Well, I believe it should be Horus that answers this. Well, I believe it should be Baal.
Oh, because of the division of the God thought forms, it divides the amount of, intensity that goes towards each of those thought forms.
Correct.
Okay.
So now let us say plainly what we've been dancing around. Who created which? Did the Egyptian gods create the people? Or did the people create the Egyptian gods?
This is interesting because they talk about going from polytheism to monotheism, and monotheism being the right way, but no, at least I've never heard an explanation of the division of energy and fueling the different gods versus the one God. It's like a consolidation of power.
Correct. Not only a consolidation of power, a consolidation in desperateness. Back to the wall, no place else to go.
And that's what happened with Allah as well, is the same thing. It was out of desperation to fight off the polytheistic religions that were in power in the Middle East proper. And it was that desperation of, again, slaves and women's and disenfranchised. And then once there was enough of a following, it was that desperation in taking up arms to defend, and desperation and arms to defend brothers and sisters they saw in Christians as well, and Jews, because they also believed in one God.
Correct.
Ah.
A consolidation of power and prayer. And isn't it interesting? Those that consolidated defeated those who did not. And the war of gods was over. And out of all of the gods that existed at that time, there are a few left. And while their people may war with each other over which one is better, my vanilla ice cream is better than your chocolate, let's go to war. The gods themselves have not gone to war. The war ended. And those that lost diminished into stories, mythology, because the winners write history. And it's never in favor of those who lose. And we tie this back again, not into the story of possibilities, But dealing with what is, they threw down the staff and a snake appeared. If there were no gods, your one god would not need to throw down a staff to create a bigger snake. There'd be nothing to demonstrate of power, because nothing would have happened besides a staff hitting a floor. But yet a snake appeared, which clearly implies the Egyptian gods were real.
I don't understand why. Why would you need a motive to demonstrate the power? Why would God need a motive to demonstrate that power? Why not throw the staff down and make a big snake without needing to demonstrate power against other gods? That's a weird wording, but do you understand the question I'm trying to get at?
I do. But do you understand the question we gave you of which created which? Did the Egyptian gods create the people, or did people create the Egyptian gods?
So that was going to the question that came up, but I'm pretty confident I understand.
Good. Then at that point, and let's take it out of this line for a second, before we go any further, and take a step back and simplify this. In the realm of metaphysical awareness, magical awareness, black arts, is there such a thing as creating a thought form?
Yes, that's how it works.
Okay. So you can agree on that basic principle. Does it have power?
If given power.
It's given power. So it is created to have some type of effect, whether it is mental, emotional, or physical. Is that true?
Yep. It manifests usually emotional, but you can give it mental, spiritual, and it peters down to the emotional.
Correct. So you can create a thought form with full expectation. You can create it to heal, to guard, to protect, to harm. Depends upon your intent. It is the idea of working with energy, or in grosser terms, understanding magic. May we borrow your pen?
There you go.
So we hold this pen, and the person who works with it is a writer. And they can literally hold the pen and charge it, so that when they hold it, their mind stills. It's the effect of the pen. It's what it does. And many times, people do this without even being conscious that they're doing it. But we fill it with energy so that when we hold it, our mind stills for clear writing. It puts us in the zone, as we say, as you say. Perhaps this comes from lighting a candle, putting some oil in an incense burner, smudging the room. It clears the energy. What clears the energy? Which is doing what? Which? Is burning the plant clearing the energy, or is your mind clearing the energy the moment you smell the plant burning? Which is happening? I set my environment for writing and my mind stills by getting 5 things in place that I love to calm my mind. Which set which? The attention or the object?
It's the intention.
But we can imbue an object with intention, so that when we hold it, it triggers, like Pavlov's dog, the reaction we're looking for.
Is that what you're saying? Creating the thought form or the magic is transferring that without the need of someone intending?
Correct. You may not even be conscious you were doing it, but you were doing it. Do you not use these items?
Yep.
And what happens when you do?
It basically it sets me in a better state of mind to get going. But I strongly believe part of it is because I intend doing A, B, C sets my brain for that. Kind of like before working out, I'll roll my back and swing my arms and legs to warm up. It gets me in the mindset to work out.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same for the mental prep. I organize my desk to clear the space, and it clicks my brain into zone mode.
Correct. You just put it into the justified version of today's society. But we're going to poke at that and go further. What happens to a pen that's used over and over and over again for the same purpose, with the intention firmly put into it over and over and over again, as you say so casually, of just clearing a space? You're constantly impressing it like a magnet going over a piece of metal over and over and over again. And what happens to the energy within that object?
It holds that intention.
Correct. When Tibetan doctors...
Oh, that's why in a lot of magical work, they highly recommend you get new or consecrated things. You don't want to get stuff from like an antique shop or a secondhand store.
Correct.
And if you get something secondhand, understand that the person who owned it, understand what the person who owned it previously used it or intended for it.
Correct.
A magical dagger that was actually used by a murderer is probably not the best thing to use.
Correct.
Or
a magical dagger used by someone that truly believed violence is an answer. That violence is an answer to most any problem. And there you are holding it. Let us tap into the astral plane. Well, good luck with that. We can't wait to see what you attract.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the example that we were giving to show the complexity of this, when a Tibetan doctor is making medicine, they will prescribe herbs, a combination of many different sometimes, and how they prep the pill is not like how it's done in pharmaceutical, where it's shoved into a container, glued together, and put into a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
The practitioner will take the herbs and put it in the center of its palms, which is where healing energy emerges from, and sit in meditation all morning. Mani Padme Hum, 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 while giving the attention to the herbs, what it is, the energy they are dispersing, the balance that they are to create, and what it is to be healed. So you're not just taking the herbs, you're taking charged herbs and translating it in a way that you can understand. Reiki digested.
Mm-hmm. that's why it's not enough to just, and actually I started to do this as to see where it goes, but it's not enough to just go get a bundle of sage from the local shop that you have no idea where it came from, and then you burn it and whew, there you go, energy cleansed. There's an intention behind it. You use the little crucible or whatever specifically for that. As you use it more and more for cleansing, that is what its intention is for. And that's the power of sitting there and consecrating, for example, or giving it the intention, as opposed to, let me smudge this room. You sit with the actual sage or incense, consecrate it with that intention, and then go about it.
Correct. Now, we've gotten off the beaten path a bit.
Yes.
What we did want to do was touch on several subjects that the audience can relate to pull at least something from it. To be able to say, okay, I may not get this, but I can see the possible connection. Because, for example, even in church on Sunday, if you're going to the official, say, for example, Catholic pomp and circumstance on a special occasion type of church setting, they're going to be fully robed. They're going to have incense in a decanters coming down the aisles to wave it over people. They're going to be dipping what's considered holy items in holy water and spraying it on the people to cleanse their energy. Blessings. In one way or another, the simplistic, hear what we just said, simplistic ways of working with energy, the rudimentary forms of beginning to understand how to, rudimentary, is in all of your traditions.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they are there denote some type of belief that intention, whether it be the intention to bring through the divine to do it for you, can't use that as an excuse, the intention to channel universal energy to create, whatever form or means it is, denotes some type of understanding of cause and effect, intention and willing it to happen, and expecting some type of outcome. And so now back into thought form. And we've used this as an example before, and which is why we set the foundation of what we just said.
Mm-hmm.
For a black magician that understands and is self-aware, someone comes to pray against another. I want to cause physical harm. I want to cause marriage harm. I want to cause disharmony. I want their dreams disturbed. Whatever it may be. A true black magician will want to know why. Because they cut me off on the way to work. No, get out. They want to understand real harm done. That the person they're going to be casting this on is a grade A jerk. Beyond doubt. That somehow who they're working for has been unjustifiably slighted. They don't just take the money. And why? Because they understand cause and effect. There's a price they're going to physically pay for casting. The reason better be of real importance. Move me. Make me feel something. Give me a reason to cast it on them instead of you. And once that is worked out, it is common practice to create a thought form to harm. In understanding the validity of this type of idea, how often does the metaphysical community talk about all the cleansing, the grid work, the purification, the grounding, the white lighting? From what? There are more claims of being psychically attacked than you know what to do with. Psychically attacked by what? You call it thought forms. You call it negativity sent from another. It is like a simple program created to repeat and loop. Sometimes, in fact, most times, it is created unwittingly. Do you want to see a group of witches casting a spell? Here's what you do. Go to your local coffee shop and sit near a bunch of people who are gossiping. And not just gossiping in a real demeaning way towards the person that's the target. And watch the energy around the table. Feel the energy shift and change. You are watching a bunch of witches, excuse us, create a thought form. Because after the tea is served, as you would say, and the meeting is over, there is this ball of negative energy that was created from the conversation that suddenly became self-aware. What is it aware of? Well, what was the conversation? What was the intent of the conversation?
Could you use water?
Please.
Here. There you go.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hence why to clean the air. What was the intent of the conversation? That limited thought form was given birth from that. It's all that it knows. Another great place to meet witches and watch them cast. Thanksgiving dinner. When you talk about the black sheep in the family and all they are doing wrong. That is another great place to meet black magicians casting spells of malintent. For thought forms to be created that move on independently to act on the essence and intent of that tea served. And in that, we use the common expression, spill the tea on that person. Thought forms are quite common. You attack each other more often than you realize with them. They are very much the doers of your bidding. But you get to rest on the laurels of, I didn't know. Now you do. Now you know. Now, our goal was to set enough of a foundation on thought forms. And we've been doing this with every step of explaining creation to you, starting off on an individual level, and then connecting it to group level, and then connecting it to a country level. So, if you can create a thought form and it has a physical effect, enough, for example, for the metaphysical community to keep the sage business doing well regardless of financial circumstances of the country, because they need to constantly cleanse, grid, and protect and white light. And then still claim someone psychically attacking you. All of that thought and process. Now imagine if a group of people are projecting that consciously to a thought form. But they don't call it a thought form. It is their idea of God. And now let's be intentionally clear here, because there is a fine line. We are not saying God does not exist and is nothing more than a thought form. We are saying within your group mind, your idea and expectations of a God is. Which is why, when a mind begins its evolution, what it understands God to be is of no reflection when it actually experiences it. The God Eckhart Tolle understood as a child has nothing to do with what he considers and experiences God to be today. Why is that? Why don't they match? Because the mind has evolved, would be the clear answer. But what is not taken into account is that when he was a child and perceived God a certain way, he was taught that by others of like mind, others who prayed to that being in that like-mindedness daily, dumping their energy into that idea of what is. Which is why, when you come into your societies, isn't it interesting? The God that is created always matches the beliefs of the society that it serves. And isn't it interesting? Those that you call the prophets within those tenets of religion, the ideology of what God is, that are able to perform miracles, that speaks truth in obvious, inspired ways, that there's no doubt they are connected, they are experiencing something we cannot understand. But we can feel its truth. We know its truth. And we can have it flow through us as they demonstrate it, much in the same way that we explained we appreciated it when it was demonstrated through our son in his particular form and fashion. But when you get right down to the brass tacks of it, what those prophets are expressing does not match the religion they represent. Which is what makes them prophets. They are not there to teach the religion. They are there to demonstrate it beyond what the religion is capable of. Always. Because their experience of what they call God is not coming from the group mind that centers around that religion. It is beyond it, which implies they detached from it to get it. And we will pause the tape and break here.
So that's how I know this shit's for real.
I love how your voice just changed because you knew you were being recorded.
Yeah. Oh, I went down because I'm really loud.
All right, ready?
Hold on. Do you need water?
No.
Okay. All right, I'm ready.
And so we continue. Keep us on track and let us know when 20 minutes go by so that we have a sense of time.
All right, perfect.
While we say time does not exist, since you have not learned the ability to be in two places at once,
I'm going to get my watch so I can keep track of time.
it does become of importance of our timing to make sure you get to class on time.
Yes.
So, okay. Our point was that we are not saying God is a thought form created by man. We are saying that while there is the experience of God, then there is the expectations of God. And so the third part of the triangle, the third spiritual attachment to release, is those expectations. When the mind grows to the point that they are not enough and attaches from the group mind projection of God in its many guises and forms to desire the actual experience of it. And that's when we say God is already created and you only need accept what it has created. And in order to do so, you must attach yourself from the group mind creating of what God is. because as you tap into it, it does have an effect upon your thoughts and emotions and limitations from that, your perspective, your perceptions of what is. And it stands in the way of what God actually created. And this group mind creation extends into the spiritual realm. It certainly doesn't affect it, just your perception within it, which is why that part of your mind is blocked. You cannot possibly see clearly if your expectations of all that is will only present itself if it meets the expectations of the many of us. It is the other way around. Turn the telescope around. And now, we're going to draw this to a conclusion, but before we do, we want to bring up an interesting point. It is of utmost importance to say this to one of them that bring through information within the group, because they are Christian-based. We had made the comment that the part of the group mind that is Christian-based is in absolute chaos and disarray for the group mind at this point in time. It is going through what we called a transformation, and we would like to lay that out in a clearer form. For those who participate on that level, to gain a clearer perspective of what they already know to be true inside, by putting words to the energy that's there. We said that the War of the Gods was in large part a transformation of the group mind within that field of what they believe, and based on moments of desperation when they had nothing to lose and devotion was being poured into the thought form of what God is and how it polluted the energy known as God and what would come from it. They believed in wrathfulness, and so was created a wrathful God. You listen to a podcast that went through the journey of God's actions and concluded in a philosophical point of view that the only way for this to make sense was God trying to figure itself out by making mistakes in its actions and realizing what does work and what does not work. All of it a reflection of the people that were devoted to it at that point in time. Within currently the group of mind of Christianity, there's a big transformation going on. There was the teachings of Christ. Which was based on forgiveness, non-judgment, acceptance, surrender, humbleness, to heal. To not preach the teachings of Christ, but demonstrate the teachings of Christ. That is your responsibility. Do not preach it, demonstrate it. It is only through demonstration that the Christian faith would remain alive and new followers be attracted, not to the words, but to the actions, as a solution to the chaos the world exists within. This has changed. This has changed immensely. There is no forgiveness within Christianity. And while we say that statement, we certainly cannot use that paintbrush to paint every Christian. But we feel confident in talking of the majority, growing larger day by day. The teachings of Christ was a nice idea. It had its day. But what has replaced it? What has replaced it is teachings of separation, teachings of hate, projecting what is wrong with the world onto others, attempting to override free will, which goes against the laws of the universe, regardless of the religion. That alone puts into play an unstable energetic equation that always ends badly. Every time. Because if you think you can change the course of the universe's flow and repaint it as you see fit, good luck with that. You may be able to have an effect on the flow, but the universe will always do a course correction and wash out the blockage. That would be you. That would be you. And so the irony, well, up first, or proof of this statement, is that this hatred is not being taught outside of the church and going into the church. This hatred is being taught at the pulpit of the church. Select teachings being read, the ones your Savior specifically said to forget because he's come to teach a new way. And those are favored in being taught more than the teachings of forgiveness. The irony for this transformation to occur is that you must undo the teachings of Christ to set in the foundation of hate. And this is not an issue of the church, this is an issue of the people. You watched this happen. You watched this occur and you said nothing. You did not fire one pastor or minister for doing this. And by remaining silent, you agreed with it. And through that agreement, it gained followers. It attracted particular followers to your church, those who love power and those that need to be right. until you are outnumbered and lost control of your own church. And for you in Christ, well, you're in the parking lot now because you have no place within the church because it has a new direction. And as these individuals have clearly demonstrated, it doesn't matter what the truth is, they want it their way. In fact, their backs are up against the wall and they are desperate. And in that desperation, they are praying. Because in order to make the foundation real, it has to become an extension and will of God. Certainly, they can't do this in the middle of church by justifying that God doesn't agree with it, but we're going to do it this way anyway. The only way it could remain in church is that it is a foundation and it is God's will. And prayers are directed in that form and manner. And if their backs are up against the wall, then they are truly devoted to make this real because they can't afford it being shown as false.
Why? Why can't they afford it?
That would make them wrong. And those that love and seek power, and those that seek to be right or righteous, to take away those others' freedoms, free choice. Freedoms is a loaded word these days. Take away others' free choice. You have to be right. Because the moment that you are wrong, what does that make you? And so their backs are against the wall. And so once again, they are giving birth to a new thought form. A wrathful God. A hateful God. And it is within that corner of the group mind
Even though they say in their songs and Sunday church and all that, God loves all his creation, God loves all, God is love.
Do they? Do they say that anymore?
God loves all his children. I hear it all the time.
You go to church?
I don't go to church. I know a lot of Christians in a conservative state.
Yes, and they say that. But then how do they have the reports of the pastor / minister talking about who has rights and who doesn't?
Well, no, that's my question is how are they creating this thought form at the same time instilling this idea of God loves all his creation? It's not that I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. It's obviously there's a lot of hatred and separation and they're the problem, but they're also singing about how God loves all his creation.
Right. Mindlessly. If they were singing those songs mindful, then it would immediately counter the first.
Mm-hmm.
But it does not.
It's just, let's put a nice little veneer to it.
So one is said per rote, per tradition.
Uh-huh.
And in there you have the Egyptians who had their Egyptian gods, but was not truly devoted because it was numbed down to an everyday existence. And then you had those whose backs were against the wall. And with joined minds come joined power. And there are many joined minds in this country and in others on this subject. It is of no coincidence that this flavor has popped up in other countries simultaneously. And attracted the followers that represent it. While those who don't have remained silent. And silence, as we discussed in previous lessons, is agreement. Now we conclude. And in conclusion, we want to talk about the obvious flaws of that which we just said, being the entirety of the lesson, the upper triangle and the lower triangle. We talked about a perspective, and we gave information on those perspectives, and we fleshed them out and gave examples to make them more solid and physical as possible within your minds. And in fact, if we were to be honest, we can say that they are fantastical. They have everything you would need to sign on to watch it if it was a movie. All you need is the hero, the sufferer, the comic relief, the angry one. And a script could be written to be a fabulous movie because you would be entertained. And the point that we want everyone to realize, and this is a personal choice, it is not enough to gain information to describe something. Because in truth, all it is doing is describing a problem and making you more aware of the problem. Making you more conscious of it. In fact, one may even say, more fearful of it. Oh no, I now understand the group mind and how insidious it is. How am I supposed to get past that? What would I detach from? And so your ego then makes it something to be afraid of. The joy of having a pet.
He's thirsty.
Time pressing, and we wait.
Couple more sips. There we go. I'm in no rush. I'm enjoying this so much right now. Are you sure? You want a couple of more sips?
Okay. And our point in that is to be more discerning on who is giving you information and what value it actually holds. Because the ego will very easily take a hold of this information and make it into something fantastical that blocks you further from experiencing the truth. And our point to you, when information is delivered to you, there are a lot of factors that could be used to put into it, to make it solid, to make it real, to make it tangible, to make it something to seriously consider as a perspective. But did they give you a solution? There is no point describing a problem if it's not to talk about the solution. A problem with no solution is not good information. And the solution should never be in someone else's hands or a time period that asks you to hold your breath because it's coming. What's coming? Christ has supposed to have been coming for a long time. People have passed waiting. How about something you can do now? And that is what we wish to conclude upon, the solution. And in this, we'd like everyone that is listening to take 3 deep breaths, sit up in your chair, become conscious, because we are about to tell you the most important information you're going to receive from this series of talking about as above, so below, which is the solution. And here it is. There is nothing holding you to the group mind. We bring this all the way back to the beginning of the book, Finding the Inner Self, the creation chamber, and being in there. And we said the first step to misperception is not perceiving the experience as a state of being, but instead perceiving a want or a need. And from that, you project yourself into the future to chase. That if you have a to-do list that you get done and meet yourself in the future, you will have the state of being that you were hoping for, that you were trying to create. And every time when you get there, the mirage disappears, and you begin with a new hope, a want, or need, and a new plan of action, because this time it will work. And it is a loop in your creations that you do all the time. The point that we wish to bring to your attention is that there was a want or a need, which implies a willingness. And that is our point to everyone. Wherever you are in the process, sometimes multi-layers all at once, because you are a multi-dimensional being. There is much talk within a New Age community of a 3D environment growing into a 5D environment because of the new energy coming through. That it is changing the reality of what is. We hate to break the news to you, but the higher frequency that is only going to make clearer what you are doing with your free will now. What it will not do is change your will. Because even the higher frequency that you are entering is still God's will. And it will not change its mind on this subject. It will not break your free will. So there is no 5D environment to escape to that's going to just happen, or that angels will bring you and make happen, or that spirit can make happen. No matter what it is that you think is your salvation, aliens, angels, spirits, jinn, whatever, it is no more than a finger pointing to the moon. Because it cannot break your free will. And if it is truly an awoken being, it won't. And if it's asking you to give your attention to it based on some future date, at that point, everything will occur. That's where all your hopes are. Give us your attention, because at this future date, which we can't clarify and make clear, but everything will be okay then. Just pay attention to our words. Where you place your power of attention, you're placing your power of creation. Which means you're giving it your energy. And if it has your energy, you do not. Worship no false idols. Worship no false idols. What you seek is within, not without. You already have everything you need. And so the point of the structures was just that. It was a perspective to give you structure, to have a larger understanding of group mind and the importance of agreement. Whether silent, whether loud, whether devotional, or whether lazily. Because you're too lazy to get up and find a new scene. It is still agreement, and whatever that energy is coloring your perceptions. And if you don't believe us, observe your thoughts and emotions on the subject. Because you talk about it, you're processing the energy that you encounter there, you're making determinations on it, which means that it is within your mind. If you have to try to make peace with a situation that means as an issue, you are tapped in. You are affected by it. And that is a choice. So let us examine that choice. Why? Why would you allow yourself to be affected by it? And there is a simple truth. Nothing affects you without your willingness. And we want to make clear here, we are talking about agreement. If Mansour decides to get up and punch us straight in the face because he chooses to, did we create that? Are we responsible for that? Because understand the power of what you're saying. Taking that to its fullest extreme, there are no rape victims in this world. None. No one has been raped. Because you gave your consent. Because if you truly believe nothing happens to you without your agreement, then you can't cry rape because you already gave your consent. It's now your responsibility to consciously accept that and make peace with it. But yet you do say you were raped, and you were. If there is a continual pattern of thoughts of that nature going one way or another, and sometimes you are not conscious of it, sometimes it can come from the emotional body, which stems from other lives. That would be an issue of working out the energy of attraction. But there are times in this world, because of free will, that, believe it or not, you're not the center of the universe. And that other people can choose things that your will would not. It's understanding free will. And so, because of free will and working in this, in any of the aspects of the point of the triangle, which is a perspective to give structure, you are not trapped by that group mind. You are there by choice, because you continue to do it all the time. It's not something that happened on the way to the supermarket and you've been swept up in it ever since. You make a conscious effort to be there. You make a conscious effort to exist between this and that. And that is your realm of creation, that you're quite happy moving left or right, saying, look, but this pile has nuts and this pile doesn't. It is still poo. So why would you have your hand in the pile of poo? And here's the truth. Because you're gaining something from it. Need or want. And that means that if you are existing within that structure, it gives you something. Let us use an example for you. We gave the example of the 10 Commandments. And in this, we do not want to just pick on the Christian perspective, because we can quote the Buddhist perspectives that has list after list after list after list that you should do as a Buddhist. That people try very hard to squeeze themselves into those narrow lists to prove that they are worthy, that they are a Buddhist, and that their mind is free, which is ironic, but yet it happens. Within every religion is expectations and lists, and our point within these lists was that it deals with the physical life and gives you a this and a that, and a safe place to be between the two poles. Does it cause you discomfort? Well, surely it does. Does it bring you peace? Surely it does not. Does it make you connected, like when you reach the top of the hiking trail and all thoughts and emotions stop and you can just exist and feel that connection to everything? It certainly does not. So logically, why would you choose it? Because what you are receiving from it is from a deeper impulse, a deeper level. And the pain that occurs from it doesn't override your fear of getting rid of the boundaries of safety. And therein lies your answer. You do not escape the group mind. You choose to detach from it. But you cannot choose to detach from it until you understand what need it is fulfilling for you, or you would not be there. You spend much energy in your work environments, which is a group mind that you claim to hate. Claim to hate. But you spend much energy to find a way to make it acceptable, even when it is not. It's just a paycheck. It's just a bad day. I have my retirement. I need my health insurance. If I go elsewhere, it may not be as much. I may hate what everyone's doing, but I know I won't be fired. Because I have the ability, despite all of the bull, to clock in and show up. And that they value more than anything. It's the least amount of effort, non-challenging, and safe. The fact that you hate it becomes acceptable. Safety. Safety. You do it to protect yourself from something new. You do it to protect yourself from being at risk of something new. You value normalcy above all else. And to hell with a new perspective. It is why you pick up books on particular metaphysical subjects and you get a particular feeling from it. You know it's emanating the truth. You could feel it begin to transform things. You get to the end of it and you put it into the garage sale. And maybe you half-heartedly tried some of the exercises. Just enough to smell change. But then you chose safety of what you know. Not face the risk of being somewhere where you don't know where you are, you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know the outcome. Because you have no faith you're going to be okay. Which shows one thing. You have no connection to the truth of who you are as God created you. And that you cannot be harmed, cannot be killed, and always will be. Not only do you believe you will be damaged, you believe you can be damaged. It shows the belief and the truth that the world is more powerful than God. Because the world can harm you. And certainly, God cannot join you on your journey. It shows a lack of faith in God. It demonstrates it. Continually in all of your affairs. And that alone should be enough of an inspiration to begin to detach from the side of the group mind of God, from the fruits of what you gain from it. Which just goes to show this has nothing to do with logic. It has nothing to do with your mind and what you think is or is not. Because the inspiration to stay safe comes from a different level. So, more fantastical information. Here is the key of understanding it. And this goes back to what we've been demonstrating. The observer self is your answer. All the things we spoke of, many will react to. But the truth of the matter is, did we say anything that's not already in your mind?
No, I even said that during the break. It's nothing groundbreaking.
All we did was talk about what is obviously so. But the difference is, because we said it, you know you're not alone and the only one seeing it.
Yes. Yep.
This leaves an interesting perspective. Acceptance or making us wrong.
Mm.
And listing all the reasons why. Because then you don't have to see it. And that is a choice. We made a promise that we will treat you as adults from your level of perceptions and what you say you value and hold important. And so once more, we call bull. Do you hold such things important? Do you truly value them? Did you really want the truth? Let's see what you do with it. We did nothing more than speak to you as adults. The observer self is the answer. Because it's not by observing what the group mind is, though those parameters and perspective is important. Because it'll give you structure to understand what you are observing when you go through your daily life and encounter energy. If you truly use it as the tool that it was given, you will step within the workplace and say, there it is. That wash of emotion. And you say simply, I picked up the emotional temperature of the room. Did you pick up the emotional temperature of the room, or did you just tap into the group mind? It's now coloring your thoughts and emotions. And there's the idea, well, I'm strong enough to stay centered so it doesn't affect me. Really? Well, allow us to get 1,000 individuals to stand around you screaming at the top of their lungs, and we want to see you maintain peace. Once more we use the example, just please step into that microwave and we will turn it on so you can demonstrate your gifted ability of white lighting and protecting yourself. Perhaps you should not step into the microwave. That might be the wiser course. But when you step into the microwave, you get a paycheck. The fact that after years of being exposed to such horrible vibrations, you get cancer and die early, it's karma. Well, yes, but what's the point of karma if you don't understand the creation of it and the choice that was invoked? And what's the point of understanding it as you're drawing your last breaths? There is so much more to life. So much more that you could experience. So much more possible. Must it always be the same pattern? Over and over again, every life? I'll get it next time. That is not what you came in for. And you are not lost. And you are not incapable. It is simply a matter of choice and finding your purpose important enough to defend and act, not from the world, from you. From you. You are the only one who has been non-supportive to your purpose by your choices. Observe that in action. And that is the power of the observer self, is that as you enter into these energies and encounter these energies in a detached way, you observe your interactions with the energy and study yourself. Because within there, don't try to correct it. Don't think you know what it should be. And don't make a list of what you need to do to change it. The first step is observing and understanding. Before a scientist runs an experiment, he must first go to school to observe and learn what it is he's attempting to experiment on. What's the point of running an experiment if you don't know the subject? How would you know a change? How would you know vital information based on reactions? You are the experiment. Your life is the experiment. It's also the classroom learning. Who are you? Why do you make the choices that you make, and what are you getting out of it? Once you understand that, then forgiveness / acceptance can come into play. There's nothing to fear because you've seen yourself and have accepted what you've seen. And there's a step that comes naturally after that. The realization of a choice to choose. The choice to really create yourself anew. To detach from by breaking the agreement you already had in play, by understanding the motives from observation of what you were getting out of it. There is nothing to resolve in the 3 sections of the group mind. You don't need to heal it. You don't need to white light it. It is fine as it is. The only thing in question is, why are you here? Because you're getting something out of it. What is that? Observe, study, listen to yourself. Give it your attention and take it off the glamour that's without. Observe. And you won't need to resolve the different sections of the group mind, because the only thing keeping you there is your own energy. And to this we'll point as an example to Mansour. Through our process with you, we've talked more and more about the observer self. You read it in the book, mentally to understand it, and then begin to be able to practice it, and then begin to understand the experience of it. So our question to you is, as you focused on the observer self and began having realizations about yourself, how do we want to phrase this? Did we give you any exercises to contact the higher self?
No direct exercises. It's all been, maybe there are multiple ways of expressing it, but it's all been observe. It's all come down to observe, take note,
And during those time periods that you had deep observations about yourself, has your higher self always been there instantaneously?
Yeah, and just like last session, it's not separate.
So there was no exercises needing in contacting your higher self. When you observed yourself,
It's not doing. You just don't do.
and the more you've learned to observe yourself, has your contact with your higher self increased?
Yeah, it's things flow more easily. It's not that I still get lost in all the mundane psychobabble, all that crap, but it's always that breathe and remember, no, there's that space.
Correct.
And it's not doing anything.
And so we bring it back to the point in the book where we said you can only know God up to the level you understand yourself. And as you see yourself, you will see God simultaneously the same way. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Now apply that statement to the new relationship you are gaining within yourself and to the outer relationship of the group mind of the understanding of God that we spoke of. Two different directions, equally true.
And I understand it hit me a minute or so ago when we first had that discussion of me saying, I want to understand my true will. And you cannot understand your true will because you do not understand the nature of your mind. And it makes complete sense. Otherwise, it's just ego fantasizing.
Correct. Hence, why we kept the information from you.
And I wouldn't want it any other way.
In this situation, though, in modern terms, it would be considered insensitive and a bunch of Kleenexes would need to be handed out. But the Buddhist expression, do not hand pearls to swine. Do not give the sacred teachings to those who are not ready so they can use it as a mental machination. It is inappropriate. It is more appropriate to say, you are not ready, return when you are. Because in order for us to express that in that way, would expose our mind to that level of energy. And we refuse. We would not degrade ourselves that way, and neither should you. The truth is the truth is the truth. And there is a time for it. And all of it is based on choice. None of it is predetermined. And none of it is destined. You're deciding right now. And that is the only thing of importance. But to bring this newspaper to bed, we gave a perspective on the understanding of the group mind, a foundation we've been laying out since we first started our conversations with you. We've already laid out the essence of why it works, the proof of why it works, giving room for it to be challenged, and showing our math and science is clear. Our equations equal up from beginning and then can be reversed and come back to center, and you don't get a different answer. It is what it is. The only thing that changes is what you put into the equation. That will always give a multitude of existence. Welcome to the universe as it is. Now, with that foundation, we now put it in perspective, understanding the group mind by using the example of the Star of David. As above, so below. And it's an interesting economy of energy that you'll always find present. The pyramids of Egypt, the triangles. How many sides to the triangle?
3.
3 different perceptions. Higher self, observer self, lower self. 3. Always 3. What happens when the 3 comes into alignment?
This is 1 point.
As above, so below. What is below understands what is and sees itself as what's above. What's above agrees, which is always the truth, and understands what it is below.
That's the agreement that we make through this.
And through the telescope that you perceive this life here, and through the other end that you perceive that experience there, is one mind happening simultaneously. Different parts of the mind, but one mind just the same. And you understand why you are a multi-dimensional self, and will start calling yourself we. And be able to flow through your mind as easily as you do from your work self to the home self to the friend self to the musical self, with no limitation, as forms of expression. And you'll understand when you connect in that way, continue the joining with what you call your higher self, which is an illusion, and the joining occurs, you'll understand the truth of the purpose of what it is to express through your mind, that it extends, because you're no longer chasing the future to catch up with yourself, because then you'll have the experience. You experience in the now, but more than that, you extend with a purpose to channel that energy of what is in expressive ways, and life will be rechanged. The 3 spiritual attachments to be released that we spoke of is aspects of how your group mind creates now, which binds the reality that you swear you hate, that's painful, that you want to escape, into physical existence. None of it is real. None of it exists. The only thing keeping it in existence is your attention upon it. Remove the attention, and the energy changes and disappears. And as we've pointed out, proof of the illusion of what is that it requires your attention to be upon it.
That whole thing of God that we were talking about, the ideas of God. The God's dying out. The God's dying out. The attention is no longer there. It fizzles out.
Correct.
This God that we are creating, that we are suffering through, that we want to escape from, we're getting something out of it. Why else are we putting attention on it?
You got it. What is that? Because till you accept it and bring it into the light, you can't change it. How could you make a choice over that which you do not see? What is on that wall? I do not know. I could feel it there. Let me hypothesize about it. It'll be really cool. Let me write a vague book about it and its multitude of aspects, but I won't observe it. I won't simply put my hand down, turn my head, and look at it and say it's a TV. Because as long as I don't have to see it, even if I dislike the effects of where I'm at, I know it and I am safe.
That's what I keep. That's what's in the corner of my perception. It's there.
And what did our sons say to you with the smoking? I've been smoking longer than I should have because I know once I put these down, it's game on. I'll be going through several psychophysical changes that I've been resisting. And I understand God is not a giver, God is an exchanger. And I wasn't ready to give up my attachments to what is. He could stand there and clearly tell you the joys that would come for him from this change, the difference of awareness, the difference of our work through him, the difference of those who would be attracted to it, his hopes and his dreams and his purpose, everything he says he values. He was willing to give up to the point of taking on physical issues from the body not being able to recover, to hang on to the comfort of what he knows. And he knew it. He knew it. Therein is human nature. And our peace to you.
My question was going to be, so what does this have to do with the channel? Yeah, that was almost an hour. That was over an hour, but fuck it.
Looks like they answered on the way out.
Exactly. I was about to ask, so what does this have to do with the channel?